Hey guys, Lawrence here from Tabletop Tactics, today with the chef.
Hello.
In another faction focus video for you lucky ducks. The good, the bad and the ugly is the theme of our initial faction focuses. Yes. So we're basically covering where the factions are currently kind of sitting in a post-Munitorum Field Manual world, as 9th edition has now launched proper and things are starting to settle down a bit. Now obviously this is not going to be a comprehensive review of all of the amazing things or bad things or even ugly things in a book. It's too much, but we're going to hit those highlights, those top notes, and as and when new rules and new codexes are released, then we'll redo it and then do more in-depth analysis. And this is just the first of many different types of faction focus. Like I'm going to do one with some list building soon, I think, and maybe even some like units, unit combos and all that sort of jazz as well. So for now, let's cover the Craftworlds, which also really need this.
For the one specific trait.
The one specific trait, yeah.
Everything else is kind of meh.
Yeah, oh, there are some interesting combos, but let's cover how this works. So the goods are basically going to be units which I think, and Chef thinks, generally we agree, that are winners in Munitorum Field Manual, or winners in 9th now where perhaps they weren't before. The bad will be units which I don't think currently are generally worth taking in terms of efficiency. It doesn't mean that you can't make them work in terms of running them for fun, but that's the bad. And then the ugly are things which are just odd or don't.
They've not translated well, or they're more subjective.
Perhaps need a rules update.
Yeah. They're ugly because they need a change, but they just don't fit in the definitive bad section or the definitively good section. Yeah,
there's something else.
Yeah. They're ugly.
So let's talk the first thing, which is good in my opinion. Aeldari in general, but we're talking about the Craftworlds here. They're still really good at the missions, in my opinion.
Playing the missions was always a good strength of theirs anyway. I don't think that's changed. They have the speed to go on objectives. Some of their units certainly have the resiliency to stay on those objectives.
Yep.
And just sort of to that end as well, because a lot of the missions, you need lots of terrain. They've got so much speed or line of sight ignoring stuff that they just kind of go, cool, we can use it, you won't be able to. So they can really play the missions and the games to their strengths, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. There's still an army which is can be active in every single phase. So psychic, combat, shooting, really, really good at movement. For me, that always makes the Elder a potentially very dangerous foe in the hands of a skilled player, because if they synergize their army right, and they've done it right in the list building section, they should be able to play those missions well. Now, I know some of you might be like, oh, well, we don't have the best troops, or how are we going to hold those objectives? We've still got plenty of really good things.
And we're going to get to that.
To actually take those objectives and to hold them or to steal them. That's often, I think, a game that you might be playing is stealing the objectives or denying your opponent from scoring with the Craftworlds. So unit-wise, why don't we kick off with one of my new favourites, the Falcon Grav Tank.
He is so old. So old. But he's come out really well.
Yep. I think he's a fantastic...
I was a bit surprised by him, actually.
You were, yeah, because Chef sort of overlooked him. I was like, have you looked at the Falcon? Because the Falcon's actually really quite good for its points in 9th.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable... he's got, depending on the weapon that you give him, he's got versatile weapons. Yeah. The transport ability is actually really useful, because that's where you can kind of tie in with that resiliency that isn't just, I have a 3-up invulnerable and I'm super tough and I have a bunch of wounds, because you kind of you could park a Falcon on an objective with a unit of 5-man Dire Avengers inside.
Exactly.
Cool. If you blow up my Falcon, I'm going to jump out and have OBSEC troops on it.
Yep.
Yep. So
it's a way to protect those squishy troops that the Elder do have, really squishy troops. So, and you can pack a lot of firepower, and if you are combining it with things like expert crafters, different depending on what whether you do a custom craft world or not. The fact that in 9th you're ignoring a -to hit with the heavy weapon now, Makes
Oh, it's
things,
huge.
it makes things like having the missile launcher upgrades.
Yeah.
You could go a Bright Lance. I quite like the missile launcher because I think that it gives you a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, the flexibility is good. I think points-wise, they're basically the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow the 2 AP difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, there'll be times where you wish you had the plasma missile. So it's probably.
And you've got an inbuilt pulse laser as well, which is a fantastic weapon.
It's probably something you can wear in terms of like sacrificing anti-tank.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, Falcon Grav Tank is a clear winner. If you guys disagree with that, let me know why. But I think if you look at the points and you compare it to other factions, for a gunboat which has a transport, I think it's pretty reasonably priced.
It's in a good spot.
Hello.
It is in a good spot.
We've then got War Walkers. Again, another massive winner because points-wise, they're not too much more than they originally were anyway.
No, I don't believe so.
I'm not even sure if they've gone up at all, actually, thinking about it.
I think
they're very similar costs.
I think we're probably talking, you might be talking like 5-6 points.
Yeah.
You're not talking a huge amount, but they're better because they can now shoot into combat. You can't tie them down.
Yeah, and those, depends on the guns that you're taking, of course. Because missile launchers are blast, aren't they?
Only on the plasma.
Only on the plasma.
So
you
again,
get to put crack.
You just fire a bunch of anti-tank missiles into a Hormigaunt's face. Have it.
And again, look, you've got the fact that you now have a reasonable costing for this unit, because one of the biggest issues they had was the fact that the minute they moved, so you didn't want to pay the points for all of these expensive heavy weapons and only be hitting on 4s.
And it was their special rule of being able to outflank, which you'd kind of go, why would I do that?
Yeah.
When I hit worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was silly, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And having that inbuilt outflank is actually a really powerful asset in ninth.
Because you don't have to use it. I think that's the thing. A lot of people look at stuff like that, or the strategic reserves, and they go like, well, I must use this because I must make... No, you don't have to.
No, so depending on the board setup, and with things like Phantasm where you can redeploy, so if someone's hiding from you, you can sort of lure them in and go, oh, well, I'm going to deploy this. They counter deploy, they hide from your unit, and you go, well, actually, I'll do Phantasm now. I can see you.
Yeah.
Or if they've got terrain which is really favourable to them, and there isn't going to be a way for you to deploy that unit effectively, go, great. Well, I'll outflank it.
Yeah, I'll wait a turn. I'll wait for the opportune moment.
It's again a really flexible unit, which the quality of the accuracy of that firepower has gone up in ninth in general, and with other synergies which you can add, which we'll sort of cover in a minute. I think they become really interesting. I like them a lot. So the next unit, support weapons. Now these were good at the end of 8th anyway.
Yeah.
I think they're still really good for their points now.
Yeah, I think it depends on the one that you take. Like, because I was looking at
Vibro Cannon is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was looking at the D Cannon going, that's pretty cool because obscuring is a thing, but it's also quite expensive.
Yeah.
The Vibro Cannon, even though the +1 to wound is capped, one, you can use that to help mitigate anything that is going to give you +1 or that's going to give you -1 later, of which there's some things which have -1s to wound, or there's, who knows what might happen. It's future-proofed in that regard.
Yeah.
The AP boost is nice, multiple shots, and because they become separate units, they obviously benefit from certain things more than others. Guide is obviously not very useful for them. Expert Crafters is amazing for them. Are they vehicles?
No.
You sure?
I think so. Yeah. No, it can't be vehicles.
Well, they're artillery. They might be vehicles.
It's true though, actually. Yeah, they are a vehicle.
So that is the only downside, is that they would give up a lot of points for bring it down.
They would give up bring it down. That is true. So it's interesting. So it's something I hadn't considered. Having said that, though, I think generally how you're going to probably see a lot of the Elder builds, or certainly how I would build them, I would generally be giving bring it down away anyway.
Yeah,
because I'm going to have quite a few vehicles.
Yeah, they're quite a vehicle-heavy army, which we will touch upon later. But they're a solid, they're still a solid unit. They always were. I think, 9 Vibro Cannons was a bit of an interesting list that was running around at the end of 8th edition. Yeah. Will you still see that? Quite possibly.
Well, it's just they're quite reasonably costed. And one of the reasons why I thought I'm putting them into the good category is they're not the most resilient, don't get me wrong, but they are more resilient than your general squishy troops.
Yep.
And they are something which you would and could park on your home objectives in 9th and just sit there, because they're not obnoxiously costed. So I go, right, well, look, here's 3 support platforms on this objective, and here's 3 support platforms on this objective.
Yep.
You're going to have to deal with them, but you're going to actually have to put some more serious firepower into me to destroy them.
And you'll also, the benefit of them being separate, despite giving away potential points for things like attrition or grind them down, depending on your sort of, whether you're playing tournament or Eternal War or bring it down, is there's also the risk of overkill.
Yes.
Because you could go, oh, well, I need to deal with one. Is a single, what are they, 5 wounds, toughness 5, or 6 wounds, toughness 5?
Yeah, toughness 5, 5 wounds.
Is one las cannon going to reasonably deal with them? Probably not. Is, 2 melter guns going to reasonably deal with it? Yes.
Yeah. But whilst you're firing at that, you're not firing at my Falcons or any of my other Alpha units. So I'm good with that.
You could split your fire, and that's going to be, that's a risk. Or in the case of things like, because you're seeing a lot of Eradicators at the moment, great. They can fire their 6 melter shots at a single artillery platform.
Yeah.
You've come out a winner, really.
Yeah.
They can split their fire, in which case, what, they're going to fire a single melter at each one? That's risky.
It's very risky. It's very risky.
So you're forcing tough decisions on your opponent via the overkill.
Yep.
So they either overkill and waste a bunch of shots, or they split fire and risk not killing any. And I have learned many times that sometimes that's a bad thing to do.
Yes.
So yeah, I think they're a strong unit still, for sure.
Next up, it's an old classic. It's the Wave Serpent.
Oh, I hate Wave Serpent.
Yeah, they're still brilliant. And they've only really gotten better in 9th, in my opinion, because of the heavy weapon options you can take. Granted, it does make them more expensive, but...
Hold on now.
Go on.
And you guys at home, hold on now. Typey. I can hear the clicker-clacker of keyboard.
Can you hear something?
But they can't fall back and shoot anymore, Lawrence.
So?
Fly is not a thing for them, which admittedly I will touch upon later when it comes to stuff like that. But you're still shooting into combat, so you're not going to tie them up with hordes, because you were probably going to shoot the horde. All that's happening is you are losing that flexibility of your choice of targets. Yeah. But you know what? You were running them as probably Shuriken anyway.
Probably.
So they're assault weapons, so they're not really taking a negative to hit.
No.
They're still amazingly good with the shield.
Yeah.
If your opponent wants to tie them up with things like rhinos or other tanks, fine. Yeah. That's where they do fall apart a little bit. But they're not really getting shifted, so they're great for contesting stuff still.
Yes, they are. And the other thing I was going to mention, because you've brought up a really good point here with the fly, is that I've found with the Eldar, because Drakari also have similar issues because they have a bunch of fly vehicles, which obviously can't, they can be technically tagged now.
Yeah.
You're better off not trying to fling your vehicles towards the opponent and their objectives, but you're better off shooting them off of their objectives, denying them their objectives whilst holding your own. That way you're not exposing your vehicles to be tagged very easily. So there's a couple of different ways. If you play it right, you can still play because you've got great range, you've generally got great firepower, you've got great speeds to get out to your own home objectives, and if you do destroy one of your opponent's flanks, which generally with Eldar, because you've got the maneuverability, certainly the way that I play them is I'll try and go in heavy on one flank and deny them an area of the board, which would be their objectives, and then I can move out and start holding that part as well.
Because again, you're utilising the speed, which is one of your key advantages. It's a change up of style in terms of gameplay, because I think that what a lot of people are still kind of doing, and this is just sort of from what I'm reading and seeing, guys, is the way that armies used to run doesn't work anymore, therefore it's bad. That doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense, quite frankly. It's just you need to have a change. Because the thing is, obviously, what you do with Wave Serpents is you'd run them forward, you charge stuff and go, great, because I know that I can fall back and shoot with impunity. You can't do that anymore. That doesn't mean that they're bad or the army's bad. It means you just need to change your play style up a little bit.
Right.
Or play Harlequins if you want to have some fallback, shoot and charge.
That's right, yeah. Or just play Harlequins. So there we go. There's the Wave Serpents.
They're still super solid.
Yeah, and we've touched a little bit on fly and how you can mitigate that as well in 9th. The last, well, semi-last, there's going to be one other thing I'll mention, thing is characters. I still think you have really good characters. Farseers and Warlocks are still not only clutch that I think you have to sort of take them in your, but they are incredibly powerful assets in 9th. Anything, things like Jinx where you can manipulate the saving throw of your opponents, the fact that you can get up, army-wide reroll to wound with things like Doom.
On a key target is massive.
It's absolutely critical. You can cast very easily and reliably with things like Farseers, with the Runes of Witnessing and various stratagems you've got, Seer Council and so forth. I'm still really happy with the state of the characters in general. I think even my cheeky Autark on a jet bike with a singing spear, or shining spear rather, or laser lance, there we go, is still good. Yeah, I got there eventually. It's still good, you could arguably just ignore him though and go for an extra Farseer or more Warlocks, but the point is I've got a good plethora of characters in my opinion. I've got options. That's it for the characters. The other thing I want to mention as an honorary, and we sort of touched on it a couple of times, is obviously this book is still really, really, really good as a supplement to the Craftworlds. The custom Craftworld traits, in particular things like, expert crafters, but Master Artisans is good as well.
Which one's Master Artisans?
Master Artisans is I think it's the Ignore Cover one. Is it Master Artisans?
Because that sounds like the Space Marine version of...
Oh yeah, it could be. Well, this is the thing when you play too many different armies. The Ignore Cover one is...
But the Ignore Cover one is good.
Yeah, it is very good.
Now, just on that note, actually, whilst we're looking at that, is that Ignore Cover or Ignore the saving throw provided by cover?
Well, let's read it and find out, shall we? It is...
We'll do it live.
Expert Crafters is your reroll hit and wounds. Absolutely. Hail of Doom, Children of Prophecy, Children of Cain. I can't find it.
I can't touch the book now, so I can't...
Masterful Shots, there we go.
Masterful Shots.
Got there eventually. When resolving an attack made by a model with this attribute, the target does not receive the benefit of cover to its saving throw.
Okay, so it's the saving throw. Because obviously if it had said doesn't receive cover, it'd be ignoring dense cover as well, which would make that phenomenally good.
No, I knew, exactly.
But that's still really useful.
It's still really useful because it still means, and I want to put these into the good category as well because they still are good, things like your Fire Prisms, things like your Night Spinners, for the Ignore line of sight, these are still good units. They haven't been hit too much by the points in my opinion, based when you compare it to what their damage output is.
Sure.
And again, they're units that you can sit back on your home objective and and provide a little bit of resilience being a vehicle. So generally, there's actually quite a lot of good for the Elder. But we do need to talk the bad.
Yeah.
So that's coming up next. Right, let's talk the bads. I know that there are some players, I'm looking at you, Maxwell, who are lamenting the state of the Elder. In 9th. I'm not. I feel really still very confident with them. But there are some bad units. But you know what? They were kind of all bad before.
I think it's not like...
Yeah, 9th's not made a huge impact on, suddenly the bad units become even worse. I think they were bad before. You weren't generally seeing them before anyway.
It's true.
And what was good before, you are generally still taking.
Yeah.
And it is still really effective when used right, really effective. So
one thing that I will say though is that inherently is a bad thing.
Yes.
Is because kind of all the old guard lists, your Wave Serpent spam, all that sort of stuff, are still that good that you're just going to keep seeing them.
Yeah.
So the army variety is lacking.
Yeah.
But like you say, it was always kind of like that anyway, and that was never going to change with the release of a core rule set. That's something that may change in a codex update, which we know that all the codexes are going to be updated. We just don't know when, which is bad.
Yes,
but
yeah, it is. Yeah.
But more specifically on those things that are the bad, the majority of Aspect Warriors fall in that category.
Yeah. It's a shame because they're one of the things
they're the iconic unit.
They're iconic.
Of the Craftworlds.
It's something that you do want to see on the table more often, but ultimately with newer codexes being released, things like Space Marines and towards the end of 8th, those units that were bad before, and it's always this codex creep, right? It's always the thing that when something's bad, it's just initially written out of the gate bad, it will only sort of get worse as other books are released.
It's exacerbated by it.
Which is a real shame. Striking Scorpions, your Swooping Hawks, your Warp Spiders. I haven't seen Warp Spiders since 7th.
I used Warp Spiders the other day.
You did,
the other week, but we don't talk about that game anymore. But the thing is, what I like to refer to it as IIS, Imperial Inferiority Syndrome.
Yeah.
Generally, whatever the Aspect Warriors can do, there's an Imperial equivalent that does it so much better, usually for the same points, if not cheaper.
Yeah, I suppose people are now looking like Aeldari players are probably looking at their fire dragons, and then they're looking over at the eradicators, and they're like,
they're looking at their swooping hawks, and then they look over at the Admex flyers. They look at the other favorite of mine was the Asurman, the first of the aspect shrines, the Phoenix Lord, that leads the Phoenix Lords, waiting for the end of days and all that, like equipped with the finest war gear that the Eldar have ever seen, and it's a shuriken catapult. Yeah. And then there's some Inquisitor that's running around, and I'll just modify a shuriken catapult that I stole off of a Guardian, and it's better.
And it's better.
Great.
Than the Phoenix
Lord. And I get that frustration.
Oh, yeah.
But that was always the case.
Yeah.
That doesn't make that right.
No.
It just makes it was always bad. It's going to continue to be bad
it needs a rewrite.
Fixed.
It needs a rewrite.
Which will happen.
Yeah, which will happen, right? So I will also mention, though, that of all of the aspect warriors, there are still a couple of winners.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I haven't put Shining Spears into the good category because they were good before. They're not like an overt winner of 9th, but they are still really good for their points. So, I mean, they should be in the good category, really. And same with Wind Riders. They were actually still good in 8th. And actually, they're still good now.
Yeah.
So, and that's quite a lot of units which are still good. But generally speaking, the Aspect Warriors are bad.
Yeah.
Fire Dragons, I'd rather get my anti-tank elsewhere because they're going to die really easily.
Yeah.
Sure, you could whack them in things like Falcons and so forth, but generally I'm protecting my squishy troops in there at the moment. I'll give a honorary mention to the Banshees here. They are bad, but they can be very effective when used well and with combinations of things like Doom. Does that make the unit good unto itself? No, because they really struggle with the strength. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
And no, you don't
have the extra strength on your power swords yet.
No.
No.
Yet. Yeah. So you're just going to have to live with that. Next, we have troops.
Just troops in general. I mean, you've mentioned it a few times. They're squishy.
Yeah.
And a lot of their troops are expensive, really, for what they do.
Yeah. The Guardians are 10 points?
10 points, yeah.
So
they still are good, but you kind of have to webway them.
Yeah.
Or, if you wanted to pay 100 points for a unit of Guardians to be on your backfield, that's fine. But at that stage, you could take 2 Vibra Cannons, which are tougher, which have a better save, more effective, longer range. For the sake of the OBSEC, I think Eldar can kind of almost look at the troops and just kind of go, meh, I'll just run a spearhead.
Yeah.
I'll take the free CP hit and have very few in the way of OBSEC, because if my opponent sits on objectives and, like you said, you sweep them off it, their OBSEC doesn't matter if they can't hold it.
Yeah, no, you deny them by shooting them off whilst holding your own.
Yeah.
And so you're safe enough to move out. But yeah, generally the troops are not great. I don't mind the Dire Avengers because they are cheap enough to then just be hidden away.
Yes.
But I mean, generally, you're not.
I think
you don't have any Primaris intercessors in your Eldar. Nor should you. It should be different, right? Yeah. But I feel that the troops in general are not great. Yeah. Then finally we got Wraith Lords. They're not that bad, but again,
when you compare them to the other vehicles,
I compare them to other things that I would take. Yeah. They're still not quite up to par. I know that there are some people which still think Wraith Lords are actually pretty good. But I always,
fun.
Yeah. But I always think, you know what? I mean, I hate if someone put Wraith Lords down against my Drukhari, I'd be like, oh, okay, great, going to be a real bad day for you.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing though, is they don't really do a lot that another unit doesn't already do.
Yeah.
Sure, you've got like the melee aspect of it, but they got to get there. They did grade. Yeah. They're not that survivable, really, and
not really.
They're quite pricey, and that extends to the Wraith Knights as well.
Yeah. I kind of rather have War Walkers. I know the Wraith Lords can fight in combat, but
Yeah, it's 6 of 1.
Wraith Knights are sadly just no.
Yeah, they're paying for their sins from the end of 7th, in my opinion. Yeah. Much like a lot of the Xenos stuff, I think, is paying for the sins from 2 editions ago, which isn't right. It's just an observation. Yeah. One other thing that I will say that is a bad, and we've sort of mentioned it kind of already, is the special characters, barring Idris, are not good.
No.
Like, they are bad. The Avatar is... I just really want him to be good.
Yeah, so do I. But
I really want him to be good.
The reality is, no. Jane Czar, amazing model, not actually that good. You wouldn't spend the points of an HQ slot on her, in my opinion.
No.
Unless you're doing it for complete fun, and I have taken Jane Czar a few times out now.
And she's decent. I think
and
that's
she is good fun.
They're decent, but the points are better spent elsewhere. There's not really a lot of stuff that they do that is amazing. You know, I mean, it's like with, when was the last time you saw any Phoenix Lords being used, like, ever?
The last time was me using Jane Czar.
Yeah. And what she did was cool, but what she did was also what a unit of 10 Banshees could have just done by themselves. Yeah. And those 10 Banshees would then be going, cool, we now also have models on an objective that you've got to shift, rather than a single character. I think that's just, again, that's kind of been the case for a while. It's nothing new. It's just still a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree. Also, we have missed one thing from good, because I do think that they are actually good, and that's the Wraith Blades.
Yes.
Because they are great at holding an objective. They are resilient. They're pretty nasty in combat, especially when synergized with the right powers and so forth.
Yeah. Because
they're a good unit.
Is there a power that gives them +1 to hit?
+1 to hit?
Or is it +1 to... There's something that does like +1 to hit or +1 to wound. One of the two.
So...
There's like a Warlock power.
There's a Warlock power, which you get Enhance.
Yeah.
And then you've also got...
Because, alongside the good of the Wraith Blades, I would say the bad is that the axe and shield combo now being the same as the sword combo, you're never going to see the swords, which is bad from my perspective, because you're losing unit variety, which I will always say is a bad thing. Yeah,
no, you got Enhance for you add 1 to hit rolls in a fight.
Yeah, so you can offset that downside. Yeah. And then you've now got this unit that's on the charge, is pumping out a whole bunch of high strength attacks, good AP, good damage, with a 4-up invuln, toughness 6, 3 wounds. 40 points a model, you might go, oh, it's quite expensive, but they have to be dealt with, and they're just going to march across the board. You give whatever the opposite of Jinx is.
Yeah, Protect.
So now they're rocking a 3-up invuln. They're not going anywhere. So you can really, and they make a really good both hammer and anvil unit for the rest of your army. It's just the bad side of it is the other Wraith stuff isn't that great. No, which is a pity.
Unfortunately not. But. So look, that's generally the bad stuff. Let's go over the ugly stuff in just a moment. Right, it's ugly time. Has to be discussed. First up, the model range. It's a funny one because you've got some of the best looking models, in my opinion, that GW have done over the years. But if you compare it with the plethora of new Imperial units and the plethora of other armies getting rules, or not rather not rules, but new models, those fine cast aspect warriors generally, I know Banshees have just been done, it's a shame because they're really iconic units, and I'd love to see some multi-part plastic kids for them. I know it's not a rules thing, but
it's an army-related thing, and I think that it is something that does irk a lot of Aeldari players. Is that sort of perceived, for good reason, lack of support? Yeah. I mean, I get it. I mean, I mentioned it at the very, very beginning. The Falcon is old. It's like 24 years old. Now, the Falcon weirdly kind of holds up relatively well.
It does hold up.
Relatively well.
It does hold up.
But, you know, your Avatar.
Yeah, it would be just really cool to have like a proper...
Is there a plastic autarch? I don't think there is.
No, there is.
Is there?
Yes, there is, with wings, yeah.
Oh, with wings?
Yeah, not on jet bike.
But not on jet bike.
There's a fine cast version of him on jet bike. Yeah.
You know, it's fine cast, 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 it's fine cast. Now, one can but hope that that's going to change. Yeah, I'm sort of looking over at our Necron shelf now going like, oh, so many new models. And that was from one box. Now, we get it. Obviously, that's, you know, a bit of a different thing because they're, you know, they were in starter sets or whatever you want to call the Indomitus box. But hopefully that is something, and this is why it's
Hopefully
an
it's a sign
ugly.
of things to come.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's why it's an ugly, because it's not really rules related, but it almost does tie into them, because it's like they've got these old models alongside old rules.
Well, that's the thing, because as we saw with the Banshees and Jane Czar,
Yeah.
and things like the Incubi, you know, when they released new models, they had an opportunity in Psychic Awakening to update the data sheets.
And they gave them, I think, a very, very small
Yeah,
update.
but there was something.
It wasn't phenomenal.
No.
They still need more help.
Yeah.
But you know, I guess the two are kind of linked, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a bit ugly, but you know, one thing I will say in my opinion is that yes, there's been a lot of new Space Marine kits, and I can get Xenos players to be like, well, when will we ever get anything? But the Necron release is massive.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
So there is a lot of Xenos stuff actually.
Yeah.
So you know, we just need to be more patient, and I really hope, you know, that we see the older range get an update as and when a codex drops.
You know, they deserve it. They've been part of the 41st millennium since day one.
Yeah, they're iconic.
You know, so it's they need it, and then I can run a Swordwind, and it'll be awesome.
Yeah. The next thing is, it's in the ugly category, and I've kind of touched on it already with the whole codex creep thing of 8th. Which inevitably ended up happening, is that the codex is old now. It's old, relatively speaking. Funnily enough, it's not actually that old.
It's not.
But, you know, it is old, relatively speaking.
Yeah, what we kind of mean by that is that a lot of it was a very, very clear 8th edition codex. And I know a lot of people, you know, like when Games Workshop said that you know, they wrote the Psychic Awakening with 9th in mind, and there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't actually work in 9th or is completely worthless in 9th. Like, you know, the common one is, I think, one of the AdMech things where they can ignore the heavy penalty, and people are like, oh, well, if you wrote it for 9th in mind, why did you bother including that? Because it was still a thing for 8th edition.
Yeah.
But I think, so the Psychic Awakening kind of, I guess you could argue, was written for 9th in mind, but the codex itself is a very, very clear case of 8th edition. You've got a lot of, this works on 6+, this is reroll failed, this is XYZ. There's a lot of, you know, the modifier cap is a big deal for a lot of Elder players, because you can't stack -17 on a flyer anymore. Quite frankly, that was always dumb. You know it was dumb, but my point is it's old, relatively speaking, because it was built for and written for a new edition, and since Codex, and it was quite an early release in 8th as well. I remember it was the first army book that came out where the traits worked for every model in the army.
That's right.
And for a brief moment,
Space Marines, it was just bikes, troops,
it was just bikes and troops and dreadnoughts,
Yeah.
and same with the chaos. And for you know, for that brief little period, everyone was like, "Oh, well, Elder are broken again." There's no surprise, and now it's kind of like, meh.
Yeah, now it's fine. Now they actually kind of, they don't. Yeah, well, now they actually kind of need it just to compete, because obviously, you know, a lot of the newer books are better overall.
Yeah.
But despite that, I still think, like, I would be very happy taking a competitive Elder army to a tournament, and I would expect for myself to do well.
I think it's
I'm
certainly,
not saying you'd win it, you know, but I'm saying
very doable.
they are a good army still,
Yeah.
because they have some incredibly powerful synergies and special rules at their disposal, which, if you play them well, it's going to work. You know,
I think that is another ugly is that you have to, and again, this has kind of always been the case with the Elder all throughout 8th, was yes, some of the, you know, like your Dark Reaper spam of early thing, and your Shuriken bike spam, or your 17 flyers. I don't know why I like 17 a lot at the moment.
Yeah, 17 seems to be.
17.
Today's show is brought to you by the number 17.
17. You know, but you take, you know, a whole bunch of Alatok flyers and Crimson Hunter Exarchs, and that was always the problem, and that isn't ugly. Is that lack of variety and lack of viability. Like externally balanced, I don't think they were very good, because they would just roll over some armies. But that's because the good units that they had were phenomenally good, and everything else was just kind of a bit rubbish. And that's an ugly, is internally they're not very balanced.
And that's the thing, and that's what a lot of Eldari players will know what I'm talking about there, where if you're not an Eldari player, they've always tends to have been this perception. This is why it is under the ugly category, that, you know, Elder are just overpowered, you know, they're completely broken. And there are elements of that which have been true throughout various editions, but it's also been true that the internal balance, and it's because they are an army of specialists, and as a result, a lot of units get let go of in favor of, and this is true of any codex to a degree, but it seems to be really true of Eldar, that any units which aren't that good are just obviously dropped in favor of taking a much more efficient choice. And the problem is the disparity between good units and bad units in the Aeldari book is really big.
Yeah.
It's there are a lot of just poor units that you just like, you want them to be cool because you want to see them on the tabletop, but they're just not that great.
Poor avatar.
But you know, that's what it is. However, this book has definitely given you enough life, in combination with the already very powerful rules that you have access to in the Craftworld book, to see you through to when we get at some point a book. You know, hopefully it's soon. I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Yep.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
But that's it. That is it.
Yeah.
That's the ugly bit.
What would your overall rating then of the Eldar be? You seem to be in the good camp.
So are you sort of putting me on the spot and asking me to rate them as like where would I put them in the meta?
What would your stamp be? So I usually give a stamp.
Like a good, a bad, or an ugly?
Yeah, as a whole.
As a whole, for me, that's actually really easy. I would still say they're good.
Okay.
And I know that there are, because I've seen in the Aeldari community a lot of comments that just thinking that they're just not good anymore, and I think a lot of that is comparing them with Space Marines, and I really get it. Like, I really get it.
Everyone's doing that though.
Everyone's doing that, you know.
You probably shouldn't, but you kind of have to.
Yeah, you know, you do kind of have to. Having said that, you can beat Space Marines with Eldar.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, you'll be limited to very specific builds, but it's not that you can't win. No. The problem is you can't really afford any mistakes, and the Space Marines are very forgiving due to the rerolls and amazing army rules that they have and units that they have available to them, so they can afford to make a mistake or two and they've still got the redundancy left to take the mission, whereas you're a bit more fragile as an Eldar army.
I think Craftworlds have always been like that, and Eldar in general have always been...
Well, I think they should be like that.
They shouldn't be a forgiving army.
No.
They should be like, oh, you made a mistake. Oh, that's going to cost you. You're going to have a bad time. And that doesn't mean that you need to play them perfectly. It just means that you would need to play them in such a way of going, like, if I do make a mistake, what's my redundancy plan?
Yeah.
It's a bit trickier to have a redundancy plan, so you actually need to think about it. Now, that is a good thing for me, because having player choice and player agency is absolutely vital for any sort of strategic game. However, my stance on I don't think I agree fully with them being a massive good, but obviously you know Eldar a lot better than me. Nor am I an expert enough to turn around and sort of say that you guys out there are 100% right and they are a terrible bad army now and should be sold or burnt online for YouTube views. That was a funny time. That was a funny time, end of Warhammer. Yeah. But I am going to take the middle ground and go ugly because of their lack of variety.
Yep.
That to me makes them an uninspiring, at the moment, army to use and play with. Yeah. They do have some options and they do have some choice. The problem is there's actually a lot which are a non-negotiable, why would you bother type thing. Sure. And that's bad for me. Yeah. Therefore making it ugly because it's just not good design.
Fair enough.
But
so you're with ugly, I'm with good still. For me, they still have enough variety to keep it fun. Like I feel I can run a jet bike list or a tank heavy list.
That's true.
I mean, you know, sure, I'm not able to use a lot of the really cool units I would love to, but I mean, that's what it is.
But the beauty of these things is they are going to change, and when we revisit them, I'm hoping that we come back in however many months it's going to be and be like, oh, so what do you think of the Craftworlds now, Chef? He's like, I may have bought all of the plastic aspect warriors. I really hope that they do them.
So do I yeah. And I genuinely don't know, but you know, it would be amazing. It would be amazing if they could update that range, and we saw them on the tables. You know,
hopes and prayers. Hopes and prayers.
Anyway, guys, hope you found that somewhat useful, somewhat helpful if you're an Aeldari player, or maybe you're just interested in picking up the Aeldari and having them as a new army. You've still got amazing models. My advice would be obviously stick with the newer kits. And
because you know that they're...
build around your good units to begin with, just so that you're able to sort of play anyone and have a fairish game. But we'll leave it there. We'll catch you on another Faction Focus very, very soon.